Hey, everybody, welcome. This is Barry Mankin here with the Holistic Home Health Podcast. We are coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, and we're going to talk about a diagnostic process for mold in homes that is gaining some popularity. And we want to talk about some myths and maybe dispel a few things, and then offer some alternatives to things that are going on in the mold world as it relates to inspections and like kind of a unique approach to inspections. So let's talk about canines. So this is becoming more popular over the past few years, using dogs for smelling out mold behind walls or in other areas of the home. They have great applications related to like drug activity and being able to find things like that, or looking for maybe people in certain cases. But we want to talk about how they're used in homes for a mold application. So what they're typically looking for, the nose knows, right? So other than Toucan Sam, they've got a pretty good nose for looking for lots of different types of either biological off-gassing or what we would say in this particular case is MVOCs. So microbial volatile organic compounds. Typically, that's what they're keying in on. And everything biological has some sort of a smell if it's live, right? So if things are active, things are moving, you're getting some sort of off-gas. With us, it's sweat, pheromones, that sort of thing. Everything biological has some sort of a smell to it, and it's going to release those things. In a case for mold, typically that's what they're keying in on is those MVOCs. And from what I understand, just from a lot of research and talking to different clients, is that they're supposed to be good at locating mold in certain areas to say, hey, we have found the source. That's at least what they claim. We found the source of your mold concerns. We are the best diagnostic process to do that. When all else fails, the mold dog will take care of it, right? So I love dogs. I'll say this. Like, I don't have a dog. I want one day, maybe when I get old. And not that I'm getting there, but when I retire, and all my friends are dead, and I just want to have a little sip of whiskey with a good buddy, maybe then I'll do the dog thing. But right now, life's too busy, and it's not fair to the dog, right? If I'm not going to be a good buddy and hang out, we got stuff going on all the time. I work a lot. We travel, so it's not really fair for me to have a dog in that particular case. And I say that leading into what are we using this dog for? So because I love dogs and I care about animals, I'm not a fan of putting them in moldy situations and exposing them to the mycotoxins that they say they smell, which you don't smell mycotoxins. But the molds themselves that contain some of the mycotoxins, and putting them in situations to where their sole job every day is to be in contaminated spaces. I'm just like, if you think about it from a tool standpoint, that would be great, but you wouldn't do that like to your kid. And from a dog standpoint, like the whole reason that we're looking for these things is because those are harmful contaminants or biologicals for humans. It also means it's harmful for the dog. So if we're going to put them in situations, we're wearing a mask anytime we're in some of these situations to where we're protecting ourselves, at least at whatever micron level that mask is rated for. But the dogs, it's counterproductive to what they're trying to do. So we're exposing them the whole time to these biologicals. I'm not a fan of that. So again, maybe cats, I don't know. But if you're a cat lover, you probably wouldn't like that either. So that's one point of I would say contention that we have with that process, just from a humanitarian standpoint, and say, all right, that's probably not good to do to your dog. The other thing would be, what's the rate of effectiveness, as far as using that dog for that application, and we'll get into that. So, first of all, being in Tennessee, and mold is pretty prevalent here, all right? And mold is everywhere anyway. Even if it's in a drier climate, there's mold everywhere. It's just part of the ecology of our planet. When we start to get into measuring the ecology within a home and a structure, and we're starting to hunt for things, we need different diagnostic processes and a good brain associated with that to be able to wield that process. So when it comes to using different tools and applications, there's limitations from every angle. The biggest, I think, pain point that people have in the mold industry looking for mold comes from, which we just talked about in our last segment. Typically, it's a home inspector, but people that come in to do air testing and let that stand on all fours, if you will. I just made that up. All fours. And what happens is people use that as the end-all, be-all for testing to say, hey, your house is clear of mold or not. That's not the case. And I've had that argument with people many, many times. Like, it doesn't mean that there's not validity in a process. It just means that you have to understand the limitations of what it gives you for the money. So very valid in certain cases. So if something is obvious in the air sampling is great. At least it's an indicator to say what's suspended. Because there's three different ways these spores or these contaminants are going to get to you. Because at the end of the day, it's about exposure, number one, right? Exposure is everything. But if something is suspended because something is residual and it's light enough still in the air, depending on a lot of different factors, or if you have an influx coming from a specific location, and things are sporulating because of the amount of growth and the rate of the growth, or you have air currents coming from undesirable locations, drawing those spores in, or in this case, MVOCs as associated with that, then you can get those spores hopefully caught on an air sample. You only have a certain amount of time, and it's usually within a certain location, and it's a picture in time. So again, there are some limitations to air sampling that are very valid. We do air sampling as well, like I said, but again, we use it in context as part of a diagnostic process. So whenever we're doing that sort of thing, we understand our limitations, we gather the data, and we use that as part of a process. With the dogs, typically what they do is they come in and they just sniff around everywhere, and again, mold's everywhere, and then they put blue tape in the areas that, his tail like maybe stood out, just kind of like bird hunting, and there may be some mold there, right? I'm not saying that they can't find mold. I'm saying that there may be mold, but the percentage of having accuracy is the question, other than what is it and how much. So with that said, typically what we want to find is it worth the value for what we're getting on the type of testing we're doing? Now, when we're doing an average home and we're doing some air sampling and maybe like a physical, say at a return for history. So an HVAC return draws in the air from the home, and then we'll get a physical sample in that location to get some level of history in the home, as well as see what's suspended. That's what gives us pretty much like a baseline assessment. So that's typically what we tout, is we want to get a good baseline. That's our average level of inspections that we do in our home or our environmental inspection business. When a dog comes in, and that runs about anywhere from $550 to maybe $950, depending on the size of your house. along with a good inspection, right, which gets about 90% of things. But if there's hidden mold, right, this is when the dog has to come in, or that's what they say. And so what they want to argue is that the dog sees the things that the air sampling can't see. And to a degree, I would say that there's a potential there. But it's not the end-all be-all. There's never a silver bullet for this process. Remember, folks, we say this all the time. There is never just, hey, this works and this doesn't work. There is levels of accuracy and limitation for each application that we need to gather data to create a case, all right, to get to solutions. That's all we're doing. So the question is then, is the dog worth it? Typically, from what I understand, it's about $3,000, give or take, for a dog to come. In some cases, more, depending on where they're coming from. For our area, they're coming from Florida, they're coming from Texas, or they're coming from up north. And you know, they got these dog trainers, and it's a nice niche for them to get into another space, right? Because hopefully the kids are doing less drugs nowadays, right? So other than canine units, you know, these guys are wanting to get a niche into the mold industry. And the question becomes, again, what's the accuracy of them for the money? So that's a lot. And if you're spending $3,000, give or take, with a reputable company that has several different diagnostic processes that can give you a lot more data that's quantitative and tell you exactly what it means and what you need to do about it, in my opinion, that's a lot more valuable. That's my argument. Again, it's not that the dog doesn't have any value, but we need to treat it kind of like an ERMI test, which we've talked about that before on different podcasts. An ERMI test has some value. We just don't value it that much. And there's several reasons why. You can look on the other podcasts about that. But a dog has some value other than his intrinsic value. But for this application, however, there's a lot of inaccuracies. There's false positives and false negatives on these hits. So at the end of the day, the mold's there or not, or it's actionable or not. And when I say actionable, I'm talking about, does it require remediation or cleaning, right? So if at the end of the day somebody needs to clean their house, they need to clean their house, right? To get a good assessment of what may be behind a wall, because that just kind of muddies the water, if you will. But when a dog goes after, I can't tell you how many times I've gone after some of these dogs with the same clients that may have invested in them or gone in it with a neighbor or something like that. And we've come behind them, and there's blue tape everywhere. It looks like a Smurf blew up in the house. So a lot of times it's a lot like a punch list for a new home build. You know, it's just blue tape everywhere. And because, again, mold's everywhere, and houses have all these penetration points. And in most cases, they're calling the dog when nothing is obvious. Because when it's obvious, we know what to do. It's not a big deal. Everybody kind of gets it. But when a house is newer and you have a really sensitized client, and I've got several of those, desperation kicks in, and they start thinking outside the box, which there's nothing wrong with. But again, is it worth the money? It gets expensive. And there's a level of desperation because I still have to come behind the dog and test to validate, is there really something behind there or not, especially if you got lots of blue tape everywhere. And I cannot tell you how many times I have gone behind these dogs and done tape sampling, swab sampling, inside cavities, on surfaces, what have you, and found nothing. And I mean, in some cases, nothing. So, and they have to pay for that sampling anyway. So it gets more expensive because we have to validate a process, right? We have to verify that process. So if we're doing that well, and the dog is accurate, we should have at least I would say 80 to 90% success rate. And again, I have yet to find, in my experience, complete accuracy. There may be a couple of spots where it was obvious and the dog finds the obvious spot, like I could have found that, right? If you know there's water damage, there's going to be mold there. It's kind of a given. It's the stuff that's hidden. So there's MVOCs is one way to look for mold, but it is not, in our industry, the preferred method, because we have different types of instrumentation to look for that as well, to look for MVOCs in a more generalized sense. But recently for us, we've come up with an alternative to this, which we've known about for a little bit, and there's technology out there that's pretty amazing that we believe is 10 times better than that. So other than our typical processes where we can do like a full assessment as another category, we've adopted something called an Instascope as part of our diagnostic process. And that Instascope is basically a smart dog with incredible accuracy. So I would say into that 90 plus percentile accuracy. These are the type of machines that they're using for clean rooms in hospitals. They're using them for government facilities, that sort of thing. And typically what happens is they would find some sort of contaminant in government offices. This instrumentation would see it. Everybody would evacuate. They get a cleanup crew to come in there, get the source taken care of, and keep everybody safe when there's a biological warfare situation or there's an anthrax, issue going on. That's what this was actually developed for the government. They've adopted it to other biologicals in the industry, into our industry for the past several years, and they've come out with the most recent iteration of it, which now also shows TVOCs and carbon dioxide levels. So we went with this machine as opposed to buying a dog ourselves, which, we could have done. But that's the route we opted to go. So let me talk to you about this as an alternative to that. What an Instascope does is it gets air sampling in real time. And there's different light spectrums that they use to measure what's coming in on the air and identify that within categories. So it doesn't give us species, but it does give us categories of what is on that particulate. Because at the end of the day, everything is on some sort of matter or particulate. That's what our exposure is. 40 times our exposure, I would say, or more, is what we're breathing, way more than what we're eating or drinking. So, and as important as that is, our argument as environmentalists is to say, hey, you're breathing every, second, basically, or every couple. And so if that's the case, what are you breathing in? What's your exposure? Let's identify what's on those particulates. And so if we're looking at an instrument that can do that and categorize the difference between, let's just say, fungal, which is what we're always concerned about, but not only fungal, bacterial, which is huge, and nobody really addresses that because the endotoxins are a big deal as well. The viral, allergens, along with the TVOCs, and again, carbon dioxide levels. Moisture is associated with that as well. But not only that, we have all these categories, but we also have it in 3D. So you can actually wheel the machine around in a room, in a space, and get all of the air, if you will, by taking the wand up and down. So instead of just having a spore trap in the center of a room, which again has some validity for species, but now we can take a scope and measure all of the air that we come in contact with, go around the whole room, get an average, and actually get a line of hits of data and identify what that hit is live. That's a big deal, while we're also measuring these other parameters. And if we can see every biological within a space in real time, that is a diagnostic process that is way more comprehensive. And it'll identify specific locations as well. So once we get a picture of the room, if you will, high and low, right, suspended or more settled out, along with all of the cubic feet within that space, now we have a picture of the total biologicals within the room, and maybe we have a reason to take a sample to get, hey, what is that? What type of mold is that? To get species. Or we just see higher concentrations of other things within that space and say, hey, we still have a problem here, and it's either inherent within the home or it's inherent within the space. Now I'm starting to hunt, right? Just in a better way than a dog. So if we're doing that, now what we can do is source identification. Because as I'm going around, as I'm getting these hits, if it's around a certain source, as like a couch, clothing, right? Outlets, penetrations in the floor, ductwork, windows, etc. Now I can key in. I know when I went around this room, I found these hits in these locations because I'm monitoring that as I'm going, right? Live. Now I can go to that source, specifically take a grab around that and key in on that and say, hey, is there something really coming out of here or not? Because again, we talk about all the time, the pressurization of the house is always drawing in negative pressure. And so those air currents or those pathways are coming from a source typically. So if we have something behind a wall, not only can we identify what it is, give the concentration level of it, now it really truly gives us a reason to take, hey, is that mold or not? Now we can take a sample and say, okay, what's the identity of that? Is that waterborne? Do we do the moisture mapping there? Of course. Moisture map, do infrared before that, to identify, maybe key in on a spot and say, is this just air or is it moisture? Is it just a little bit of condensation around an outlet? Like, a little bit of cladosporium or whatever? Possibly, right? But now we're being scientific about the process. We can identify things, and we're doing it for half the money, honestly. So, which is big. So you get quantitative data, you get categories of contaminants, along with other parameters, and you're doing it for half the cost. So because we can do that with real scientific data now, I'm not as big a fan of the dogs, to expose them to our contaminants. We don't want to use them like a guinea pig or, like a rats in a laboratory. We love our dogs. Not that there's, we probably problems with rats too, but like at some point, these dogs are domesticated. They're our pets. And we don't want to expose them to those type of contaminants. So outside of that, we're really looking at what is the success rate, and can they actually give us the data that we need anyway? Because at the end of the day, I have to go behind them anyhow, right? So I just don't think it's worth the money to be able to do that and expose them to it at the same time. It's a neat concept, and I think it's cute. But if you think about the implications for the dog and the accuracy, knowing that there's, only so much of a percentage and they're only looking for MVOCs typically, they say that they can find mycotoxins. They say that they can find molds that are inactive, and they may have a percentage of that. But you know what doesn't lie? Numbers. Numbers. So if we can have data from machinery that does it, and it's a lot more comprehensive, and it's a cheaper cost than having somebody fly in from out of state, I would much rather use that as a diagnostic process, which we do with our full assessments, which is our next level up. Whenever we're doing some air sampling with it for identity, generalization, getting some history samples, and keying in on locations. And then we can hunt for specific areas to take sampling to say, all right, now we have a level of accuracy that is not contested. It's there or it's not. I can't tell you how many times we've done clothing in the same way for people that are sensitized. And I take the machine in there And we say, where are these clothes from? Or where's this couch from? Oh, that's at our old house where we were exposed to mold and we're still sick, right? Well, they're still wearing the clothes and they're still sitting on the couch, or they still have the rug, or whatever the case is. And I can literally aggravate that material and see what the biological is coming off of it. And if it's full and off the charts, then I'm going to say, all right, what is it? Is it worth taking a sample of or not? Otherwise, I would say, get rid of it. If you were in a really bad location before and you're bringing that history with you, the idea is you typically want to know what you dealt with on the front end to know, is it worth keeping or not? Especially if it's sentimental or if it's expensive, then we can test something like that and say, okay, what's an average on this of mold spores on this particular item, and say, oh, all right, do we need to replace this or not? If I see certain types or concentration, always type in concentration, and we know we've cleaned it, maybe. We're doing an experiment soon with that, which we'll talk about soon, with clothing and using the Instascope as a diagnostic tool before and after. So we'll talk about that really, really soon. But it is the most accurate thing that I've seen. It's probably the most accurate machine on the planet that I have used to be able to identify at least categories and concentration levels and locations. So we love it, and our customers love it, and it's gaining more popularity with us. We're probably the only one in the state, as far as I know, that has it. And we're a part of a couple of different studies, doing some other experiments with it in the country. So we're excited to see what we can expand on with that machine. And again, keep your puppies close, love on them, and they're loyal, but don't expose them to mold. You don't want to be exposed to mold. Don't do that to your dogs. Okay. Number one. Number two, get a good diagnostic. Get a good inspection. Get people that have the right machinery that know how to use it to be able to tell you, is your house healthy or not? Are you exposed or have the potential to be exposed to certain contaminants, any biological contaminant in the house? And if we can do that today with the technology that we have and be successful as far as like getting a case together to build, to make action items to warrant doing some either construction or some removal with remediation, then you truly have a process that you can bookend now and prove it on the back end and say, it was here before, it's gone after. It's really that simple. But we just have to be intentional and have the right technology and a good brain to use it. So the other thing that I'll say is, not everything is hiding behind the wall. As much as people are sensitized, they're always scared about what's behind the walls. Unless we have a reason, there's going to be mold behind every wall, I tell people. But unless we have a reason to actually open that wall up, let's just get a good diagnostic process to validate that. And then let's be on the offense. If you're sensitized, let's talk about technology. Let's attack the air, get a little bit of offense and a whole lot of defense to catch those things. Make sure that we're minimizing sources, which is, I get source control. It's the biggest thing. But to go so far with source control to spend that kind of money and in a process that is not quantitative with the data, I just think it's a waste of time. And money. So let's be intentional. Let's get good people around you. Check us out with Four Corners Environmental if you're in the Nashville area, and we can take care of you from a diagnostic perspective. And then if you need some help with that, we'll provide solutions, people that can help you with those solutions, and that way there's no conflict of interest. And hopefully we'll bring transparency and some peace of mind to say, hey, your house is in good shape, or let's take care of these things in a certain way, and you can trust the process, okay? It's all about process and exposure. So if you can give us a call whenever you need us. Otherwise, feel free to type in to us and check out our other podcasts, sign up, subscribe. There's going to be a whole lot more education coming in on this, all right? Thank you so much.